sorry if anything is kind of off, but that's what it's going to be. And this one today is going to be all about pedigrees. Pedigrees are basically a family tree for geneticists. It's a family tree that is specifically meant to like track the passing down of a disease or a specific trait through a family. So it's a really interesting tool for genetics, and it's going to incorporate me teaching you about the different modes of inheritance for genetic diseases and some common genetic diseases that we look at in pedigrees. So I hope it's interesting. It's something that's widely used in genetic counseling, which is the field that I hope to go into. I hope to go to school for genetic counseling next year. So pedigrees are a huge thing that we use because it shows you like how a disease is being passed down and who all has it in the family, which is big for like kind of guiding what genetic testing needs to be done and stuff like that. So I hope that you enjoy this video. I hope it's interesting, and I hope that you learn something about genetics and about genetic diseases. So yeah, thanks for watching, and let's get started with teaching you genetics. Let's look at our first pedigree, but wait, we can't forget to put our name on the top of the paper. So my name is Pamela. Hopefully you knew that. But yeah, okay. So let's look at our pedigree. So it might be kind of hard to decipher what we're looking at first, but I will explain it to you. So first of all, over here it says that we are looking at Huntington's disease. So this is a very, very awful disease. Causes degeneration of the brain, and it's very, very terrible. So this is something that is dealt with a lot in genetic counseling, but that is what we are looking at today. And all of the squares in this map, this pedigree, correspond to males. So squares are males and circles are females. And from the key over here, this is something that is pretty much the same for every pedigree, but the ones that are filled in black are people that are affected by Huntington's disease, and the ones that are not filled in are unaffected. Okay, so now we can see that the first generation, they're labeled over here with Roman numerals, so we have one generation, second generation, and third. So the first generation we're dealing with is these grandparents, this male and female, and the dad we know is affected by Huntington's disease, or I guess it's the grandpa in the grand scheme of this. So now this means that they are married, so a line connecting two people means that they are married, and then these are their children. So the lines coming from this marriage are their children, right? So child, 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 child. And then we know that these are marriages, so these are people that are not related to the original grandparents, but they are married to their children. So that's just the basics to look at. Okay, so let's start with the first question, and it asks, which members of the family are afflicted with Huntington's disease? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so the way that this worksheet is writing it is that this would be first generation 1. So I1, and then second generation 2, 3, and 7. So II2, II3, and II7. last one would be 3, 3. So the third labeled person in the third generation. Sorry for my messy handwriting. I have my microphone like in front of my face and I'm trying to write around it, so it's kind of difficult. So these are the identities of our 5 affected individuals. So let's look at the second question. It says, there are no carriers for Huntington's disease. You either have it or you don't. With this in mind, is Huntington's disease caused by a dominant or a recessive trait? So I talked about dominant and recessive traits in my last video, so that might be helpful to go and watch. But essentially, for a dominant trait, let's use the allele B. So what we use is an uppercase letter for dominant traits and a lowercase for recessive traits. So in order to have the dominant trait, in this case we'll say brown eyes, because brown eyes are dominant, you only need one brown-eyed allele, and it doesn't matter what the other one is. So each individual has 2 alleles, one from each parent, so you would have brown eyes, whether you had both big B's or if you had a big B and a little b, it doesn't matter because brown eyes are dominant. Whereas in order to have blue eyes, which is recessive, denoted by the little b, you would have to get both little b's. You'd have to get a little b from each of your parents. So that's dominant and recessive. Dominant, you only need 1 copy. Recessive, you need 2. So when we are talking about diseases, we have something called carriers. So here, this genotype is what we call a heterozygote. Hetero because they have 2 different alleles. These both have the same one, so they're homozygous. This one is a heterozygote. And in the disease world, that's what we would call a carrier. So because most of the time, diseases are recessive, which would mean you need both copies in order to have the disease. So this person is not going to have the disease. The dominant trait is to not have the disease. So they would be okay, but because they do have this one little b, they are a carrier of the disease. They don't have it, but they are carrying it. And so it is a possibility that they would pass on that trait to their child, and their child could potentially get the disease, but they do not have it themselves. So that's what we're looking at here, is they're saying there are no carriers for Huntington's disease, and you either have it or you don't. So based on that, the disease would have to be dominant, because we don't have any carriers. So we know that Huntington's disease is dominant. And this is another thing that we can see from the pedigree. So something you often see with dominant diseases is this parent has it and 3 of their 6 children got it. So typically if something is recessive and only one parent has it, it's possible that none of their children will get it, and depending on the genotype of the unaffected parent, they might be able to pass on the disease, but it's pretty unlikely because the unaffected parent is most likely totally fine and they aren't a carrier. So that kind of tells us it's probably dominant. Okay, so next we are going to look at how many children did individuals I1 and I2 have. So that is, okay, this is the second generation, so this is the first generation, I1 and I2, and they had 6 children, and then this is the wife of that child, and this is the husband of that child, so 6 children. Okay, pretty easy. How many girls did So we are looking at this individual and this individual. So here they would be uncle and niece because her mom is his sister. So uncle and niece. So you kind of just have to look at this as a regular family tree. And then I2 and 3-5. So we've got this one and 3-5. So that would be grandpa or grandma and grandson. So we'll just say grandparent. Okay, so that was basically just trying to get you accustomed to what a pedigree looks like. So now let's move on to the next pedigree, the next problem that we've got here. So the pedigree to the right shows a family's pedigree for Hitchhiker's thumb. Is this trait dominant or recessive? Didn't know that Hitchhiker's thumb was like a trait, but that's funny. Okay, so let's try and figure out if this is dominant or recessive. So the thing that we look for in figuring out if something is dominant or recessive, if you ever have a situation where you have two unaffected parents, so two parents that do not have the disease, and they have children that have the disease, that means it must be recessive. And that's what we have right here, is this mom and this dad do not have the disease. They don't have Hitchhiker's. In this case, it's not a disease. I shouldn't be saying disease, but they don't have Hitchhiker's thumb. But their kids do. So we know that it has to be recessive, and that's, if we're looking at these genotypes, like what we would get here is these guys have little b, but these would have to be carriers. They would have to be carriers in order for them to both pass on a little b. So kind of hard to explain, but essentially, like, if this disease were dominant, there would be no way for their kids to have it if they did not have it. Because if it was dominant, that would mean that these were little b, because they don't have the disease. So the only thing they could pass on would be little b's, and they couldn't have children with the disease. So when you see something like this, it's got to be recessive. So that is what we will say here, that this is recessive. And I already told you how we know. We know because children got it when their parents did not have it. Okay, so now, how are individuals 3-1 and 3-2 related? 3-1 and 3-2. So they are the parents. So they are married, right? But the little icky part that we see here is that, so these are her parents, but then these are his parents. So they are cousins. So that's a little icky because, yeah. So I think this like double line just denotes that they are, they're cousins. So they're related in two different ways, but they are also married. And that is honestly a really good example of why we don't have children with our relatives. A lot of people think like, oh, if you have children with your relatives, then your kids are gonna have 3 heads. Like, that's not really how it works. There's nothing genetically that is like wrong about mating with relatives. I don't know, obviously it's wrong, but like right? So none of these people have Hitchhiker's thumb. Obviously, somebody had to be a carrier because this person is a carrier and this person is also a carrier. But if they had married unrelated people, the likelihood that they would marry someone who's also a carrier is really, really low. So this trade, like that little bee would never get, they would never have children that have Hitchhiker's thumb because all their children would just be carriers. But because they are related and they got the exact same little bee, so this little bee is probably coming from one of these parents, and it came from one of these parents, so they got the exact same recessive allele from the exact same person, and that is how they had kids with Hitchhiker's thumb. And so that is how, like, incest is bad, is because you get the coming together of recessive alleles when, if you were marrying people that were not related to you, those alleles would never come together and you wouldn't get that disease. I did not mean to make that sound like when parents have kids with diseases that it was incest. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you do marry relatives, you have a higher likelihood of that happening. Okay. Next, what are the genotypes of the two individuals that have Hitchhiker's thumb? So yeah, we just did that, so they have to be little and little. But in this case, I don't know, I guess we can call Hitchhiker's thumb H, so like those two individuals would be little h and little h. Homozygous recessive. Okay. Next, name the two individuals that were definitely carriers of Hitchhiker's thumb. Would be those two. They have to be carriers. So 3, 1, and 3, 2. Because we know that they both got 2 copies of the recessive allele, so both of their parents had to have had one. So they gotta be carriers. Is it possible for individual 4-2 to be a carrier? 4-2. So it is definitely possible for them to be a carrier because let's go back to a Punnett square like we did in the last video. So we'll write a little Punnett square. Okay, so we know that these parents have to be big H, little h. So the possible genotypes they could pass on, mom is going to pass on big H or little h, and dad is going to pass on big H or little h. So their kids could be big H, big H, big H, little h, or little h, little h. So there are 3 possible genotypes that their kids could have, and 50% of these are heterozygous. So 50% of them are carriers. So yeah, in their children, there's a 3/4 chance or 75% chance that the kids will not have Hitchhiker's thumb, because they've gotten at least one dominant allele, and then a 25% chance that they would get Hitchhiker's thumb. But 50% of them are carriers, 25 are not, and 25 have the disease. So, yes. Yes, it's possible, and I just told you why. So, yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the last pedigree on this worksheet. Okay. The pedigree to the right shows a family's pedigree for color blindness. Okay. Which sex can be carriers of color blindness and not have it? So here they have the half-shaded people that are carriers. I don't know why it didn't do that up here. I guess, I don't know, because we were trying to figure out who could be a carrier, so it didn't sex can be carriers, females. Okay. With this in mind, what kind of trait is colorblindness? Parentheses, use your notes. We obviously don't have notes, but we have Pamela, so yeah. Alright, so whenever you see a difference in sex, meaning one sex can get the trait or one sex can be a carrier or something like that, we think sex-linked trait, right? So I talked about this in, let's see, my very first video was all about a sex-linked trait, so maybe go back and watch that. But the premise of this is that females have two X chromosomes, right? XX. And males have an XY. So this is the only example of a time when somebody does not get two copies of a gene, right? Up here, we've got two copies, because you have two of all of your other chromosomes. But when it comes to sex chromosomes, females have two, so they will get two copies of any trait that is located on the X chromosome, but males can only get one. That gene is not going to be located on the Y chromosome, so they only get one copy of any gene that's on the X chromosome. And so for males, those rules of dominant and recessive don't really apply, because that, like, basically what's happening here, like why these people don't have the trait is because the dominant allele is taking over for the recessive allele, so they don't have Hitchhiker's thumb. But if you only get one copy, it doesn't matter whether you get a dominant or a recessive allele, you are going to show that trait. You're going to show the dominant or the recessive trait because you have nothing to cover for it, right? If you get one recessive trait, you're gonna have the disease. So males and females have a difference here, whereas the females, it works just like it does up here. If they get a dominant and a recessive, they're just a carrier. They don't actually have the disease. So yeah, so here we have an X-linked trait because it has to be on the X chromosome. And based on the fact that females can be carriers, it is going to be X-linked recessive. If it were dominant, we would actually see the exact same thing for males and females. Yeah. Okay. Next, why does individual 4-7 have color blindness? 4-7. So that's a female, right? And she is the only female we see here that actually has color blindness. All the other females are carriers, and then it's only males that have the disease. But here we see a female with it. So pretty easy to figure out. It's because those rules are still applying, right? So females can be carriers, but they could also have the disease if they were to get two copies of the mutated X chromosome. So two copies of the disease on each X. But in order for that to happen, the dad would have to be affected with the disease. That is how X-linked traits work, because a female has to get one X from her mom and one X from her dad, right? So in order for her to get two mutated copies of the gene and show the disease, she's got to get one from each parent, which means she has to get a mutated X from her dad. But in order for the dad to have a mutated X to give, he would have to have the disease, right? Because he only has one. So we see that individual 7's dad does have the disease, and then in addition to him having the disease, the mom would have to be a carrier, and that is what we see here. So what happens is the child gets one mutated from each parent, and we get a girl with the disease. But you can tell that, it's much rarer for a female to get the disease because she has to get it from both parents, whereas the male only gets it from one. So, like, we see that here. We have a carrier female and then an unaffected male. He does not have it, but the male still gets it. Neither of his parents are colorblind, but the male gets it because the mom is a carrier, and she's passing on one of the mutated X chromosomes. So yeah, that's why so many more males can get it, and it's pretty rare for a female to get it, but her father has to have it. So her father has it, and her mom is colorblind, and her mom is a carrier. I'm not going to write it all out. So the next question is, why do all of the daughters in generation 2 carry the colorblind gene? So we see that here. 3 daughters, and they're all carriers, and that is because of what I just explained. So the dad is colorblind, and females, they get an X from both parents, right? So they have to get the dad's only X chromosome. He only has one, and he's gonna pass it to all of his daughters, and it has the color blindness gene on it. So every girl he has is gonna have that gene. They're gonna be a carrier. But what we see here that's different from down here is that the female, the mom, is not a carrier of it, and so all of the girls are gonna get their second X from mom, and it's gonna be totally fine. So they're all carriers, right? So they are all carriers because dad has it, but mom does not. She does not have a trait. And you can kind of see that too with how all of the males are not colorblind. It's kind of interesting that all the females are carriers and the males are not colorblind. That is because a male has one X chromosome, and well, he got his Y from his dad. He has to get an X from mom. So if mom is not a carrier, none of her boys are going to be colorblind because they're all gonna get a perfectly fine X chromosome. So yeah, but then obviously, yeah, we get these men with it because the moms are carriers. Okay, so then the last question here is, identify 2 generation 4 colorblind males. Generation 4, we've got this guy and this guy. So 1 and 5. That was a pretty easy question. Okay, so here we have seen a dominant trait, something called autosomal dominant, because it's not on a sex chromosome. Autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, and X-linked recessive. Okay, so here is our second worksheet on pedigrees. Again, we gotta put our name. Pamela, surprise, surprise. Okay, so let's look at this sheet. I have not looked at it yet, but we will see. So this is just telling us what a pedigree is. Maybe this was the one I was supposed to do first. Oops. Okay, it's fine. Alright, so here we've got 3 sets of grandparents. No, it was probably not the one I was supposed to do first because it's more complicated. Okay, and we only have 3 affected individuals in this entire pedigree. So let's see, try to identify the genotypes of the following individuals using the pedigree above. So, individual 3-3. So that is this one. So are they homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, or heterozygous? We know that they have the disease, and we see here that neither of their parents have it. So we know from the last worksheet that the disease must be recessive, right? So if we see an individual with the disease like 3-3 here, they have to be homozygous recessive. Okay. Homozygous recessive. Alright. Next, we've got individual 2-1. Okay, individual 2-1. So we see that this individual has the disease, right? So they are homozygous recessive. But then we see that none of their children have the disease. So we are going to assume that individual 2 is perfectly fine, that they are homozygous dominant and are not a carrier, because if they were a carrier, then we would see 50% of their children having the disease, and that's not what we're seeing. So none of their children are affected, so we're going to assume all of their children got one mutated copy from dad and one mutated copy from mom, or sorry, one mutated copy from dad and a totally fine copy from mom. So all of these are going to be heterozygous and carriers. So heterozygous. Okay, they will all be that. Individual 1-1. That is this one. Same as individual 1-3. Homozygous recessive because they have the disease. So all people with the disease will have the same genotype. And then lastly, individual 2-4. So individual 2-4, because we've got these guys getting both recessive alleles, they have to have gotten one from each parent, so each parent has to have one, and because neither parent is affected, they also have to have a dominant allele. So individual 2-4 is also heterozygous. Heterozygous. Okay, so that is our 4 people. Next, is this trait dominant or recessive? We already talked about that. It's gotta be recessive. I feel like that should have been the first question because, we kind of needed that in order to figure out what the affected individual's genotypes would be. But oh well. Okay, and then how can you know for sure individuals 2-3 and 2-4 are heterozygous? So we know that for sure because they have affected children, right? So their children have the disease. Children are affected. So yeah, they have to be heterozygous. Okay. Let's see, the last question. Brown eyes are a dominant eye color allele and blue eyes are recessive. A brown-eyed woman whose father had blue eyes and whose mother had brown eyes marries a brown-eyed man whose parents are also brown-eyed. They have a son who is blue-eyed. Draw a pedigree showing all 4 grandparents, the 2 parents, and the son. Indicate which individuals you are certain of their genotype and where there are more than one possibilities. Okay, that's difficult, but let's see. So, brown eyes, dominant to blue. Okay, so blue, anybody with blue eyes, we know is homozygous recessive. We know their genotype. So, a brown-eyed woman whose father had blue eyes. So let's start with the brown-eyed woman's parents, right? So, okay. So these are the parents, and we are going to say that blue eyes is the, affected, right? So we are going to fill those in because they are recessive, or actually we can just say, yeah, no, we'll do that. eyes. So dad is affected. Okay. And then, so that is the female. And then she marries a brown-eyed man whose parents are also brown-eyed. Okay. So we've now got the man's parents, and they are not affected. They have a son. Okay, and then they are going to get married because we know the brown-eyed woman, brown-eyed man are going to get married. Now, they have a son who is blue-eyed. So they have a son who is blue-eyed. So let's figure out what the genotypes could be. Okay. He's blue-eyed. So dad is blue-eyed. So he, we will say, is little b, little b. We also know that grandson is little b, little b. So that's what we know. Okay, next, in order for this grandson to get both mutated copies, so both blue-eyed genes, I'm trying not to talk about it like it's a disease, but it's hard because that's kind of the context we're talking in. But in order for him to get two blue-eyed genes, he has to have gotten one from each parent. So they have to be carriers because they are brown-eyed. If they were blue-eyed, they'd be little b, but they both have brown eyes, so they have to be carriers. Little b, big B, little b, they are both carriers in order for their son to have it. And so then, because mom got a big B, right? She has brown eyes. It had to have come from mom, but we do not know if mom is big B, or big B, little b. We know she got a little b from dad, and we know she got a big B from mom. But mom could be big B, and have given a big B, or she could have been big B, little b, and have given a big B. We don't know. We'd have to see like other siblings of this mom in order to maybe find that out. So now let's talk about the dad. So we know that he is heterozygous, which means he had to have gotten a big B from one of his parents and a little b from the other one. So one of his parents has to at least be a heterozygote. We know that they are not little b because they have brown eyes. But one of them has to be a heterozygote in order to give the son that little b. But we don't really know anything beyond that. They could both be heterozygotes. It could just be one of them, but we don't know which one. And then the other one could be homozygous dominant, or they could be heterozygous. So we don't really know that beyond that, but we can get the genotypes of the parents, and we can determine the two affected people. Beyond that, we don't really know. So yeah, that is how you draw a pedigree, and that is how you analyze a pedigree. So I hope that was interesting. I feel like I talked super fast, so I'm really sorry about that. I just get going and I start talking really fast, so I'm sorry, but thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope it was interesting. Maybe try drawing a pedigree for your family. I feel like that would be really cool, really fun. Use something like eye color. It could be cool. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was interesting, and I hope I did an okay job explaining. I feel like it wasn't the best, but that's okay. Also, my stomach will not stop growling, so I'm really sorry about that. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Let me know if you want to see more genetics ones. So yeah, thanks for watching. Sleep well, sleep